Okay, hi everyone. My name's Hugo Liu. I'm the CEO of Orchestra, the best-in-class data pipeline management platform. And today we're going to be seeing how you can do feature engineering in BigQuery using Vertex AI. So, what is feature engineering? Imagine you have a set of data on people. You have their name, you have their date of birth, you have their, their sort of age, and you're trying to predict their height. A feature would be something like gender. So you would find that, if somebody is a man, then all things equal, they're likely to be taller than if they're not a man, because generally that's true. And feature engineering is an area I was really excited about when I, heard about LLM functions. And that's because a lot of the data that we use is unstructured. So if we take a look at this set of dummy data I've got, it's really, really simple. I've got some call notes, and these call notes are highly unstructured. These couldn't be used to predict anything because these are just strings. However, with LLM functions, you can actually extract quite a lot of helpful information from these. Obviously, normally things like call notes would have a date as a separate column, but in the case they don't, we can see it's here. We can also see that annoyingly, the date is kind of formatted in different ways. Finally, we can also see there are things like priorities, which are here. We can see there are drivers of priorities. And we've even got notes on the individual that we've made the call with. So, we can already think about the features we might want to get from this. So one might be the date. We might want to have a Boolean column for whether or not the company's got budget. We might want to have another column for what the priorities are, another one for the drivers, another one for the value drivers, and so on. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can do that using Vertex. It's really cool. So the first thing you need to do, and I'll assume you know how to do this, is set up a model. So if I scroll up, we can see what I've got earlier. In this query, you're going to run a create model statement followed by the name of your model, and then you follow it with remote with connection, and then you put in the region and then the name of the model. Finally, you need to specify in the options under the endpoint sort of argument what underlying model you want to use. This is important because in BigQuery, depending on what machine learning function you want to use, the model is different. So, for example, if you want to use translate, then that's a different model to just Gemini Pro. Something that's really important to note here is that the region in which you create the connection has to be the same region as where your data is. So in this case, my data is in Eurobus 1. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and create my model. Now, after you've done this, you can use the BigQuery Vertex AI model syntax to call the model. Now, we're going to skip over this complicated query and go to a simpler one here. So as you can see, I've got a very simple table. I've got ID and I've got call notes. So the first thing you do is you select from the table. Here I'm just selecting two columns, but then I also have the prompt. Now the prompt is really interesting because all you're doing is concatenating a string with the call notes. And this is very similar to what you might do in ChatGPT. So here I'm going to say, I will provide you with call notes for a sales deal. Call notes contain the organization's top priorities. Should probably have a kind of punctuation there. And then I'm telling the model what I want them to return. So I'm saying, return these as a list of strings. Do not return any other strings. The priorities should be signified by priorities in the call notes. So we can see we've got priorities here. And then I'm going to call this prompt. And this is very important. You must call this sort of prompt the word prompt. This select statement gets nested in this ml.generateText. So this ml.generateText function takes three arguments. The first is model, and that's the name of the model you created earlier. The second is the query. And then finally, we have this struct object, which contains parameters that you generally don't need to tweak. But if you sort of play around with things like the temperature, then you'll get a different result. And obviously, depending on how long you want something to be, you can sort of make things longer by changing that. But obviously, if you increase the number of maximum output tokens, then you're going to incur more cost. Finally, to get the result, you should select from the thing you just created. And as a matter of course, it will generate this object called ML generate text result. This is a kind of like dictionary that's highly nested, and I'm going to return the prompt sort of prediction as this has budget Boolean. I'm actually going to go ahead and call it priorities because that's a different one. So let's run that and see what we get. Okay, this might take a while. So while it's running, I'm going to go ahead and show you what you might want to do next. As you can see here, I've got some other prompts, and these are commented out. Obviously, what would be really cool is if you could have numerous prompts, right? So maybe you also want to get the date as a new column. And then you might want to write something like this. So ML generate text result, and maybe this is appended with 2, and then I can get the date. Unfortunately, you can't do this in BigQuery. So if you want to have a single query that essentially uses LLM functions multiple times, you have to do it with a subquery. So in this case, I actually have a subquery. So I'm essentially doing the whole thing first. So I'm going to get a deal pipeline ID, property notes, and then the prompt. And then I'm going to select from that up here. I'm then going to have to join in that subquery into another one. So this is exactly the same code, but just with a different prompt. But you can see here at the end, I'm going to left join B. And that's how you get multiple results. If we go back to the function we did earlier, we can see here that Gemini has returned some outputs. Unfortunately, it's not exactly what we want. So we asked it just for a list of strings. This, for some reason, has an asterisk. This has got new lines. That has the sort of syntax, which is exactly what we don't want. So, it's sort of almost conversational. So as you can see, the prompt is pretty important here. And by no means is this an incredible prompt. We can show you what something which is a bit better looks like. So in this case, it's a very similar prompt, but we're going to ask for the date in Unix format. Got the date back in Unix format, and it looks a lot better. It's exactly what we want. So hopefully this gave you a good idea of how you can do feature engineering in BigQuery. It's obviously very powerful to be able to use LLMs as if they were SQL functions. But obviously, as you can tell by some of the pausing in this video, depending on how you do the prompts, these things can take a bit of time. We've only got 4 observations here. So if you're thinking about using this at scale, a bit more research is definitely necessary. But hope you enjoyed. And obviously, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.